In the suburbs of Nigerians come the Nigerians come.
No, let me fire.
Except you want cut and join that record beside this.
No, you don't use mic. You don't use mic. So na phone mic. I mean, but you dey use mic this time. Huh?
Yes, sure.
The normal thing. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Yeah, okay. Let me just fire away then. So for this episode 12, we thought that we would take time to appreciate our audience, which, much to our surprise, has been growing since we started this podcast something like a year ago, or maybe even more than a year. So I guess this is a birthday party in some respects, and because of that, it seems like a good opportunity or moment to celebrate not ourselves, but our audience, you know, in a real communist tradition that, you throw the party for the party itself and not for the leadership. So,
for sure, yeah.
So what we've done here, or what I think we could do, as we discussed, is maybe talk through some of the feedback we've received over the course of, the 12 episodes or so, not counting the episodes that we've put on Patreon or some of our test episodes. And we'll come back and say more about the Patreon bit in a bit. But so I thought we all thought that we could reflect on some of the feedback that we received. So maybe I could just read out some of the feedback, matching them to some episodes that we recorded, and then we could kind of respond, talking about whether we think the feedback is fair or, whether it's nonsense. And then we can go on from there and talk some more about audience and that sort of thing. How does that work?
All right, I think that sounds good.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, nice. I think I'll just go in the order that is on my screen, not necessarily order of episodes. One of our earliest pieces of feedback came from someone who said, "My friend listened to the Nigerian Scam podcast, and the first thing she told me was that she's getting civilizing mission vibes. She said it felt like educated intellectuals coming to tell the lower classes how they should articulate their own grievances. As per, it's the burden of the knowledgeable to educate the ignorant, and which raises the question, at what point does that education become imposed?" And then she also says, and then my friend also asked why you guys keep talking about what the left could have done, as if you yourselves are not members of the left. So I guess I'm starting with the critical bits, because, we've received a lot of thumbs up and applause memes and take one beer memes and whatever, right? So, but I guess we can start with some of the more critical feedback. What do you guys make of that? First of all, the whole civilizing mission thing, like intellectuals trying to talk down to the working classes, and secondly, the whole critiques of the left whilst maybe being part of the left.
In this context or scenario, that we are coming together as a bunch of people coming together, weighing things from our own revolutionary standpoint and putting it out there. I think that's a testament to our ability to open things up and even try to democratize in such a way that people have feedback and give their input. If we were talking down or talking at people, then it wouldn't be in a fashion whereby we'll be considering what people are saying and all that. And then again, we must be realistic in this kind of scenario or this kind of country that we are in. First and foremost, revolutionary understanding has been hidden from the people for a very long time. So it's only commonsensical that a bunch of people might, or a few people might have it. So it's our work to do the Promethean task of bringing fire down to use for the people. That okay, yeah, this is this knowledge. How do we spread this knowledge to the people? So would you rather we keep short and not do anything, or what? Like, again, let's understand the class dynamics of our society. If we have the middle class or the intellectual class that has gone to sleep, that are slumbering and not remembering their revolutionary duty, then maybe our podcast or the type of things that we are doing is addressing that lack, or that absence of revolutionary word, of revolutionary understanding that's been sorely missing. So that we are filling that gap in doesn't mean that we are talking down at people. Of course, a bunch of people are not on Twitter. Like, we have a country that's so poor. How many people can afford the data to listen to 1 hour, 2-hour podcast, that kind of thing. So that you're listening to it and that you're picking that we are talking down on people might not be a fair assessment, where we also put links to read, or documentaries to watch, even movies that you can tap into and make reference as to what's happening in society, means that we are making a full attempt to bringing people on board and exposing them to what they might not have understood or what they might not know. So I know there are anarchist tendencies that feel that some sort of structure or any kind of arrangement that's maybe orderly or top down or something is like as if you're dominating the people. There are some times where history would have deprived a bunch of people some understanding, and then the revolutionary middle class will be the one that will bring that knowledge down and democratize it, and make it well spread amongst the people. So we are fully conscious of not sounding as if we are talking down on people. Rather, we are doing the work of bringing this knowledge down, reopening it, and making it accessible to the people. So that's what I would say is our own task, and that's what we're conscious of that we're doing. So I hope that has addressed that concern from that listener.
Yeah, Mecca,
Okay.
you wanted to.
I'll take a slightly different approach. So I'll take the criticism and I'll take it as fair, but with a bit of caveat. So it would have helped if one knew which episode was being referenced, or that prompted that critique. But broadly speaking, my sense is that we have experimented over the last year, and that even with formats. So we have the format where we have conversations, and then we have this format now where we have people come and then we interview. Part of the feedback that I had gotten was that the conversational format was fresh. It seemed to be something that wasn't being done. So within that sort of
talk radio.
Yeah. So within that sort of format, especially when Said speaks big English sometimes, I'm just
drag me.
There's a sense in which that can be interpreted to mean that we're talking at people, but essentially it's also the language that we choose to use. So you're talking about terminologies here. Of course, you can't talk about that without saying the usual culprit, which is bourgeois. The bourgeois class, the bourgeoisie class. Terminologies, that which people aren't conversant with. But most importantly, why I think that it's important to take that critique and think on it, chew on it, is that if we're getting that sort of response from someone who presumably belongs to the middle class, then it might be that our long-term goals of reaching those at the lower rungs of society is is not that it might take us longer to achieve it, so why want to check on the language, because ideally what I think would be more impactful is when we get to a point where the plumber on the street understands what we're talking about. The hairdresser, the mechanic, the vulcanizer. So I mean, the language. I think on that note that I would want to take that criticism as fair, and see what we can do to address it. So I'll leave it there, for now.
I mean, actually, I guess I'll echo some of what Emeka said, but maybe also draw from what OAG said, because maybe I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I mean, I take the criticism as well, that this isn't a super working class oriented form of discourse per se. But I think that some of that is like hardwired into the medium that we're using. Like, I just don't know how many unionists or people in the informal sector listen to podcasts in general. And that's not even just a Nigeria question. That's probably global. So, I mean, I think in going into this sort of project, we obviously were aware of the limitations of a context where, like, smartphone usage, despite what the techno optimists tell you, is still very limited. Not to talk of data, even amongst the people who have smartphone. Not to talk of the kind of like excess data that you can use to download a podcast or just stream it. So, I mean, I think that implicitly, if not explicitly, we know that our audience is limited by these factors and that has a class implication. But I don't think that means that that this has no implications for working class politics ever, because I think that, I mean, the aspect of the point that resonates with me is where she talks about the divide between intellectuals and the working class. So that's clearly an issue here, radical intellectuals and the working class. And that's something that has been an underlying thread in a lot of the conversations we've had. But I think part of why that divide exists is because, I mean, even amongst the intellectuals, like, the radical intellectuals, I don't know that we have maintained the culture of talking. Do you know what I mean? Like, just speaking across left divisions, speaking to ourselves. So I think maybe there's some part of me that's like starting a conversation, and having a conversation is one way to then begin to, over time, develop the tools, the skills required to actually bridge class divides. Whether or not that theory of change proves to be accurate is another question. But I think that's where we're starting from. So it's not like this attempt to speak to or at the working class, because obviously this wouldn't be the venue per se, like podcasts are not exactly the format. But for one, I think it's like, if anything, political, then it's an attempt to actually gain skills, right? To start from somewhere, to actually start to have a conversation. And even if this only ever reaches the activists amongst the sort of radical intellectuals, or the activists among the working class that have the means, then at least like that conversation has started, and people who are straddling the line between radical intellectuals and workers, some of whom do listen to the podcast, like intellectuals who are workers, for instance, ASU members or that sort of thing, then I think we're achieving something. But I should also say that, like, for me, the aim of immediately starting to speak to or educate or interact with the working class through this medium is also a bit grandiose. Like, I mean, it presumes that we know the way forward. You know what I mean?
For the working class itself, or trying to
exactly
distill out, directly.
When I don't know if we've even
what they want.
We've even sort of hammered out the pathway for ourselves. I don't know if we've fully made sense of the way forward ourselves. So it strikes me as though that's the first task, as in reviving a sort of radical intellectualism before we even talk about trying to bridge the divide or make some impact.
Yeah, but I think we have the map. Yeah, I think let me chip in. I think we have the map, and that part of what we set out to do would be to try and explain or have conversations around issues that show Nigeria, the nation state as a scam, really. So in that regard, I think the language matters, how we unpack, these issues, and then tie them into, the larger conversation that we're trying. I mean, how we unpack issues and then, of course, tie them up to the larger conversation that we're trying to have, no matter what it is. I think that there should be some method of breaking it down, such that, it's fairly accessible, but I hear you when you say it's a bit grandiose to think that, the platform allows us. That kind of work is usually done on some other much more granular level, but but I'd still say that there's a bit of that criticism from the young lady that we should take.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, it comes from a strong Marxian angle in some respects, but then I guess there's a certain kind of OEG is saying, maybe anarchism to it, because the truth is that even Marx and Engels, etc., these were intellectuals, not necessarily workers, and there's a sort of necessity in various historical moments for intellectuals to go and agitate, and whisper to people that their conditions are as bad as they think they are, because there's no mechanical, I guess to borrow some Marxology from OEG, there is no mechanical connection between class and ideology, right? It's not that people who are members of the bourgeoisie will never criticize the conditions of capitalism, and it's not that people who are members of the working class will always be aware of that it's capitalism that's holding them back per se. So, I think personally, if we achieve through these conversations some level of catharsis for ourselves, just on a day-to-day basis, from the point of view of dealing with the Nigerian scam, if we can have these conversations and feel slightly less dispirited about the conditions that we find ourselves, and if you can provide a forum for others in the left to come and have such conversations, to let down their guard a bit, to banter, to reflect on the past and on present conditions, I think we're doing okay. Even if this does not necessarily, immediately start to speak, in the exact terms that, members of working class are completely familiar with at the moment. Maybe that's
just add some sort of structure to it. Okay, let's say we do it this way. There might be a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So the short-term goal might be kickstarting revolutionary discourse, theorizing and putting in context what the Nigerian scam is. And then from that solid standpoint, try to, go deeper into that. The long-term goal be trying to break it down, go deeper, because what we have is an absolute dearth of these things. You hardly find revolutionary discourse about what is going on in the country as it stands, So first and foremost, we have to create that condition, package it, and then put it forward as to, through channels whereby it can be spread into, maybe forums or fora where, people can make what they want to of it. But the first work of uprooting revolutionary understanding that has been buried by the ruling class for so long, I think it's a commendable task, that every person that is doing this should, be proud of. And of course, we're not blocking any other person that wants to come and make it more accessible, because to be realistic and dialectic with what we are doing, not the whole of the working class in Nigeria are on Twitter. They are not on Apple Podcasts. They are not on.
These are
we
the
have
facts.
to know where we are, where we stand from. It's not like we are blind to the fact that we have to break this down, but actually kickstarting something, we are kickstarting something. So we are not blind to the fact that we have to make it more accessible. This requires resources, this requires, time and all that, so we are just starting off. This is just 12 months, as it's been mentioned. So we are not blind to that fact. So I'm taking the criticism too, but we are not blind to the fact that this thing has to be made much more accessible, and then for people to tap into it for the understanding of their material conditions and how to solve them. So that's it.
Nice. Well, I think this also partially addresses the second question, which was, how can we rationalize being sometimes critical of the left and actually being part of left organizations, etc. ourselves? I guess maybe we don't need to dwell on that too much.
That we speak like we're not part of the left. I like that part.
Right. Yeah. I think
that one gets me all the time.
It's fun.
That one gets me all the time.
Yeah. But that's the funny thing. It's I suppose who has always, I don't know. How would you respond to that?
I think Emeka should go at this and I would.
I don't know how to respond to that, because I take it as a compliment.
Yeah, same. Actually, same.
Well, okay.
Same here.
Maybe I'll just go at it from the generational angle.
Okay.
We have people that have been in the forefront of this thing. Not like we're exactly young and not like we're exactly old, but there are people that are supposed to be in front of us, being at the forefront of this thing. Why is it that it's a bunch of relatively young guys that are now being at the front of this thing? Then it means that, we are rebuilding the left from the scratch. If we are rebuilding the left from the scratch, then we are just starting off. So you can't expect us to...
We're not rebuilding.
Yes.
I wouldn't say scratch.
So there are some people in front of us. Yeah. Those are the when we say the left.
They
are the people in the eye of the storm, that are supposed to have the better understanding of what's going on, but it seems as if that generation, for some reason, have not been able to achieve what we feel they should have achieved. So we are part of the tradition of the left,
right?
So we can't uncouple ourselves from that, but when we say the left, maybe those are the people that we mean or that we meant in those episodes. I don't know if
okay. Although some of the young lefties are also clowns, I should say. In fact, some are more clowns than the others. Well, including where I would join you, and we said this before, is that I think all of our criticism or our critique on the show is also self-critique, which is to say that we don't necessarily exclude ourselves from some of the contradictions and scams that we are referring to, because the condition that has produced these previous generations and that some of the limits that they faced, some of which were structural, right, some of which weren't exactly their fault, are limits that we also confront, so
even getting deeper.
Exactly. Some of these limits, some of these obstacles are even getting deeper. So in trying to point them out and in trying to assess where the left has made strategic failures, etc., we don't exempt ourselves, because I think because we're participating in the organizational left more than just the discursive left, it means that, we're part of some of the decisions that are made, and we have to take credit for that. So I guess, and we've said this before, I think, but it's worth emphasizing again that, for us, the criticism of the left cannot exempt us, we can't take a fully, us versus them perspective on things, because
we're not inoculated or isolated from
Yes, because at one point that becomes anti-left, for one. And then secondly, it's just not accurate, since we actually organizationally are embedded in...
We are doing, in clearer terms, we are doing something on the ground.
Exactly.
Part of organizations. In clearer terms, let's put it that way. So, we're not just on social media or podcasts just talking.
In fact.
Yeah, but, I mean, to add to that bit, I think, I mean, and I'll speak for myself here. I mean, I think that part of what we're doing is, like you guys, rightly said, is a critique of the left from within the left, and that maybe because of the way that we joke about it, it's also difficult for people, to see that it comes from a place of frustration, a place of why is it how which is why it's easy to say that or to think that nothing has been done prior to now. But it's almost as though you take one step forward and then you lose two steps, going back. So I think that there's that bit, especially for me, especially when I come into conversations about the left, and then there's also a part of me that realizes that I am speaking to a cross section of Nigerians who are largely conservative and have no clue what the left is about, and I'm trying in my head, not to block them out. Even though I'm not willing to cede grounds where it's not necessary. So there's part of my own approach to conversations around issues from a left perspective that acknowledges that some of the people that might listen to me are potential haters, if you like. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think we have given that one a decent amount of time, but that's an audience member that is also like a kind of friend of the show, if I could put it that way. So we always appreciate feedback from her. But yeah, I think we made some decent points there. Are you guys happy to move on to a next piece of feedback?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay, so actually I should also say that I think that one arose after one of our first episodes on NSAS, when we talked a lot about what
the left could do.
Exactly, what the left could have been doing or should do, and that sort of thing. And the next one also came after an NSAS episode, but it was our most recent NSAS episode where we were rethinking some of our earlier assumptions about NSAS. Talk about left,
I like that one.
Left self-critique. Yeah, and the guy says, he says, my own iPhone now second hand though. That's how he starts. And then he says, the thing about leadership, in a leaderless protest and a struggle for leadership by many influencers, is it the most popular that automatically becomes the leader? Is democratic leadership about popularity generally or popularity on a certain issue? And then he says, but then again, thank you for this podcast. This is the kind of conversation I like. It was free discourse, not the scripted kind of podcast. And then he makes an episode recommendation that we can come back to. But yeah, I mean, here he's talking less about the podcast itself, even though he comes, he does praise the format. And I'm sure you guys are happy to hear that after the searing critique from our friend. But rather than talking about the podcast in general, I think he's talking more about a point that we raised in the episode, where we were talking about how, some people were like, oh, not just because I have 2 iPhones and a Range Rover doesn't mean I'm a Yahoo boy. And it's like other people there didn't have iPhones at all. Or, I guess we were trying to illustrate the sort of class differences within the NSAS movement, right? And then he's also raising this question about, does the most popular person on social media or that sort of thing automatically become the leader in a supposedly leaderless struggle? So yeah, what do you guys make of that as a response to that episode, and then just the content of the post?
I don't know. I'm not sure now. I think, but that's the episode where there was a mention of the Sega guy, because somehow what the way this response resonates with me, in
Yeah.
terms of popularity on social media translating into leadership, that's where my head, goes, and I think that I'm using that chap really as focal point, or the point of focus. It's I think the question answers itself. You get all sorts of charlatans with, massive,
Yeah.
massive, massive following.
Rebecca, but you're shaking a table here that has no legs. I mean, let's shake the real tables. Because Shega has already been dragged by the liberals. So
some position of leadership until you're found, or or the people can see through your agenda. So
yeah.
I don't know that popularity is leadership. I mean, that's not what it should be. Yeah, but I mean, and I think that there's an episode, one that I think it's only available on Patreon, where you where I think where you trash this out, but on the from the point of view of technology and how the way Twitter algorithms, for instance, works is such that it's not democratic in that sense, so I think it's a combination of people's aspirations and the way that technology and the tools, I mean, that they use in terms of medium is configured, and their own inability, I don't want to say they are unconscious, their lack of consciousness, but that inability to decipher what's separate chaff from wheat.
I think it's a reflection of where the people are at the moment, because it's always repeatedly has been about popularity and who has the highest amount of following, and most times it's always even tended towards who's closer and who has the ear of the oppressor most. So if you have like some sort of close link to the oppressor, people tend to want to listen to you, feeling that you are the conduit whereby their requests can get passed onto like the oppressor. And it speaks to the lack of revolutionary ideology, because when you know that you can't walk through the context or the confines or the parameters that your oppressors have set for you, first and foremost, you start to distance yourself from the people that are their representatives amongst the youths. And then you start to look towards genuine people. You start to organize for yourself. You start to believe in yourself, your own organizational capacities and capabilities. And then you look for people that share the same, aspirations, and have the same ideology as you. And then you partner with them. But when you leave it to celebrities, you leave it to music stars, you leave it to this thing, then what, well, are you guys in the same political, economic, or socio-economic, strata? No. So it means even if they go and represent you, or even if they say they are representing you, you can't get a full representation of yourself by this. So always we've seen that the people have been hoodwinked or taken on a ride by these guys, and it's unfortunate. That's why the necessity or the need for pushing revolutionary consciousness and understanding is much more important now. So that people won't ride on societal problems and climb on top of it and become some sort of star. We mentioned Sega now. Has been found out. There are a bunch of them too that ride on the misery of the people for some sort of patch on their shoulders. That should be avoided. So when you structurally understand how society works, you can make your own analysis and know who to partner with and maybe see as your leader, genuine leader in times of societal crisis. So that's where I'll put it for that question.
In fact, I might even go a bit more ultra than OAG and say that I think that popularity on social media is the opposite of democratic, as in I tend to think that the more followers someone has, the more likely it is that they're saying nonsense. Do you know what I mean? I mean, particularly within our own, like.
I think Emeka should do some sort of statistical.
Yeah, Emeka, you should crunch the numbers. See how much shit chatting becomes rises on somebody's average.
No, but that's the direction that naturally it will go in that direction, because you feel under enormous pressure to say something about any issue, whether you have a hang of it, whether you have the range for it or not. I mean, you just feel that you must wade into every conversation, you know. But let me talk back a bit. I think that, I mean, if you look at Twitter, for example, I mean, where some of these things play out the most, it's usually the norm that the person has or amasses a measure of influence before he aligns, you know, with, you know,
that's
the
true.
Oppressors.
Yeah. That's true. You gain the audience first, and then you sell the audience.
I'll give you an example.
Abi?
Yeah. Omojua came on my radar for the first time because he was embroiled in some sort of tussle with an airline over some gadget, I can't remember, you know. And he gained some sort of popularity and, you know, durned, you know, the garb of activists of some sort. And at some point when the APC decided, you know, or the ruling class decided that it was time to unseat Goodluck Jonathan, what happened was that people like Obi Ezekwesili, El Rufai, and the like started to gravitate towards the young guy, you know, which also then got into his head. And then by the time I started reading his tweets, I could tell, you know, within reading a few tweets that I was talking to a bullshitter. I mean, I was you know, listening to a bullshitter, you know, to be honest, because it had gotten into his head, you know. He then thought, this somebody who, if you no substance, I'm sorry to say, no, basically doesn't have.
Yes. but keep it real.
You know, so I mean, so that's what it is. No politician is going to gravitate towards you on social media if you don't have any sort of influence. Look at the Sega thing. You know, so we the other day, it turns up on Twitter that there's some kind of proposal that he's submitted to the Atiku campaign for thousands, millions of dollars. You know, what does that guy know about organization? You know, who is he? What is he organizing? You know, and then you see that when they even go after certain individuals, it's about what they can gain. And I'm not. I don't care what side any of them take on issues. So the people today who would flock towards the Hondaing guy, or what I'm not sure how his name is pronounced. You know, as far as I'm concerned, there's no difference between Sega and Hyundai, to be honest. It's a whole sort of, you know, crap. So, that's
no, but you know, sorry to interrupt. I mean, totally, man. And this is why I'm saying that there seems to be some sort of inverse correlation between like being an influencer and like actually having any sensible, you know. Having any real like meaningful impact in the real world, like, because, you know, people praise you for like loudmouthed takes, you know, or people praise you for like online, right? People praise you for like having the most kind of clickable thing to say, but to what extent does that, I mean, how closely or far away does that tack with, the sort of seriousness that's required to actually move us from where we are to where we're trying to be? I mean, and for one, like, again, because of things we've said in other episodes and venues about the way the algorithm works and like, there's this sort of echo chamber that is produced. The extent to which the perspective you're articulating is actually widely supported in amongst the general masses is not often reflected by the amount of likes or retweets you're getting on Twitter, right, or whatever. So you then have this kind of like zombie world that's created where the rules like are some sort of perversion of what's happening in reality, and that becomes the metric for some people of like what people think, or and not to say that there's absolutely no relationship, but between like what people are saying there and like the what people are saying in other forms of media, not to talk of what's underground or outside of media or trends that aren't actually being kind of captured in discourse. But yeah, I mean, it just isn't very straightforward. So yeah, I think like this guy is tacitly suggesting in the question, and like you've all been saying, it would be a really terrible world indeed in which Twitter following or level of influence exerted on Twitter automatically becomes seen as unit. Yeah, exactly, as the marker of like what the people want, or democracy in any sense. And there have been moments where it seemed that way, right? I mean, during the NSAS thing, for instance, there were obviously people like Sega or some other celebs like Davido were shouted down, but it seemed like that was in some respects one new class of influencers trying to overthrow the old class of influencers, inter-influencer revolution rather than one from the outside. But anyway, I don't want to make us, I don't want to pull us back into a total NSAS conversation, but I mean, it just seems to me like there wasn't a paradigm shift where online spaces were more fundamentally democratized, as much as it was a new group of influencers, including the Hyundai types, trying to take the center stage and wrest control from the, older millennials, the Omojuas and that crowd. So anyway, all that to say, to me, it just seems like, it seems to me like total dialogue of the deaf at best.
It seems, like that's the mode or the route that things have always gone. When they start opening, someone rushes to take it in, and it's the same thing when crisis happens. There's a bunch of new oppressors, this time online oppressors or online influencers that want to control or have a hang of, the narrative, hang on the narrative and all that, So, but yeah, that's what it's been, man. It's left for, conscious elements to try and also get into that space and try to make, revolutionary understanding much more popular, so that, these guys will not be the only ones having stuff to offer.
Word up. I'm happy to move on to the next one if you guys are.
Yes, we are. I am. I don't know, make out.
I can't do good buy stout. So, okay, no, but I think he's just muted.
All right.
Anyway, he'll join in once he's back. I mean, the next one or the next series were a result of our interview with Comrade Ofiong Akwa. I think that was one of our most popular episodes, actually, when it was released. Wow. I think some of the recent ones are now challenging that one for popularity. And of course, we've also just denounced popularity, so I shouldn't even fall back on that clearly anti-people medium of measuring things. But anyway, I mean, whatever popularity is worth, that one seemed to get a lot of feedback. And I think most of it was positive. People praised the flow of the conversation. One person even said this is your first podcast I've listened to from beginning to end without break, which is a nice compliment. But it, of course, also suggests that prior to that,
You know the hell that they skip the shit. Bam. Next.
yeah, we were getting hell of skips. So, maybe there are lessons to be learned from that episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm just going to read one. I'm going to read one of the pieces of feedback we got from that one that I think was probably the most extensive. And so the commenter says, "Hello, I'm just listening to the new episode and I have some things to say. LOL. I think Professor Akwa is an interesting person, but I am disappointed with some of his points about federalism and the question of ethnic minorities in the Soviets. First off, the 1970s Soviets was the decay of the Soviets. Of course, there was Russian chauvinist attitude during this time. The political bureau was made up of big men who were mostly Russian. I think it's unfair to only judge that era of the Soviet Union. Also, most of the ethnic nationalists were bourgeois and reactionary, in some cases Nazi collaborators. Also, none of these ethnic nationalities were ever a nation, so the argument for a nation state can be tricky. I think most of his points on federalism are a national issue. Security and unemployment are national issues." And then he finally says, "I think his grievances are fair, but his conclusion sort of comes off as ethnocentric adventurism." Haha. That came from a listener on Twitter, I believe, who DM'd Emeka, who I think has now joined. I guess his point overall is that, he had a disagreement with Comrade Akwa's take on the lessons to be learned from the breakup of the Soviet Union. And also was skeptical in general about the idea of ethnic self-determination. So that was a comment from one individual, but there were, I think, a few others who, in fact, I'm just seeing that he had a second, I've just seen that he had a second line there. So let me quickly read it before I let you guys respond. He says, "Finally, Nigeria can't be compared to the Baltic states. Most post-Soviet countries are failed experiments. The issue of self-determination doesn't exist in a global capitalist world. If Ukraine is a sovereign state, why would it be used as objective to expand NATO and further Russian aggression? Ibom People's Republic will also have self-determination to actualize their adventurous objectives." Okay. I'm not sure what he meant at the end there, but yeah, there are lots of points in there. So I don't know which one we want to address or respond to. OG, do you want to take a step?
To fully address those things, I think Comrade Okwa will be the one to answer those points, because it wasn't as if we agreed hook, line, and sinker with what he said all through the episode, because anybody that listened properly would feel and hear that there was some sort of pullback from our own side as to the ethnic perspective on things and all that, So, and when we go into these issues, there are a lot of nuances to what happened in the Soviet Union, what thing happened, what happened to the other states and all, And again, I like for us to bring things to our own perspective. There are a lot of issues that we need to solve. There are a lot of things that we need to look at in terms of even the ethnic angle, religious angle, that kind of thing, the economy and all that. So it's usually not straightforward. It's Comrade Okwa will be the one to, kind of take those things one after the other and, break it down. I am not ethnocentric. There are a lot of things that need to be solved. However, what I can say for the Nigerian context is that the Nigerian ruling class have weaponized ethnicity to a very strong point, and religion, such that those things in any revolutionary consideration, they must be addressed. How they are going to be addressed, I don't know at the moment. I've not theorized anything out, but it's getting to a point where that must be factored in any revolutionary formula or formulae we want to put forward to solve the Nigerian problem. So we've gotten to that point now. So and when parts of the superstructure become major, what does Mao call that? He calls it a major, like it can shift the major. We need to look for the major contradictions now, and part of the superstructure can actually become major contradictions. So who knows what we have to do to solve the Nigerian problem? It has to be dissected, and for us to figure out what the major contradiction at the moment is, for us to go at it and smash from there, and then move forward to solve the other minor contradictions. So that's where I'll put that as regards that issue.
What up? Nice. Yeah, Mecca, do you want to take a stab?
You see,
he's using straw for his beer. Stout.
How you take this? I don't pop my beer. I think that the guy's response was more geared at us as to in a way that says that stopped short of him saying, "How could you bring that kind of figure?" on what claims that guy have to be left. So and then the pains. I mean, he was to go ahead and try and punch holes in Aqua's comedy Aqua's
point by point.
But and then he ends off by giving off that sarcastic laugh. That this guy can't be serious, And I wouldn't say that I don't know where that kind of feeling is coming from, But I think that this friend of the podcast also needs to know that there's been a lingering national question. And that's part of the reason why we went that route, was to hear the other side of the argument, and one that's not been heard. In fact, I'm happy to get that kind of response. I mean, it means that we did our work on that.
Sure.
And I mean, people might not know this about that particular episode. We couldn't agree ourselves.
No, it was obvious.
It was obvious. I think it was obvious from
So I mean, I don't think that we need to go and delve into answering the specifics of that particular response. He wasn't even. I don't think he wanted, us to respond to. It was just, as a matter of fact, he wanted to state his opinion and say this really can't. The leftists can't be saying this. But I mean, there are all sorts of elements in the left. Anybody who's tried to work within the left knows that. So. That's my take on that.
No, I really appreciated the guys' feedback.
One of my favorite
and even the sarcasm join, because we are definitely fans of tasteful sarcasm in our mentions. So feel free, particularly Emeka. If you have any sarcastic thing to say, send it to Emeka. I think is would be my suggestion. Okay, cool. So, no, I think you guys addressed that one well. I wouldn't even bother adding to that. We definitely disagreed a lot on that episode. I mean, I'll just say before we got started. But I'm happy we did it because let 1,000 flowers bloom and whatnot. Right?
Yeah,
like, the left is
that kind
is diverse. So let's hear out the various perspectives. And I think that will enrich conversation and our practice as well. So I'll probably stop reading comments. I mean, I think there's been a lot of applause. Hey, good job. Love what you guys are doing. This is brilliant. Blah blah blah. Hands up. Hey, toile. Etc. etc. So people have offered to buy us drinks. But nobody has actually bought us drinks.
I never seen nobody tell me that one. I'm hearing this for the first time. Okay.
Pretty worrying. That's obviously a sign of a crisis on the left.
Baba, send them my way. I'll take them up on the offer.
Lack of drink solidarity.
Yeah, exactly. Lack of follow up. a lot of promise, no delivery. But
Yeah.
I think aside from this Comrade Offiong Akwa episode, which got a lot of responses and a lot of them critical, another one that has been getting a lot of responses was one of our most recent ones, the Peter Obi Marxism versus Obiism Labour Party conversation. And actually, there isn't any specific feedback that I want to highlight. I mean, a lot of them were complimentary in terms of there was a lot of, I mean, the same amount of criticism that Comrade of Akwa got. I think there was that much praise for Ayo.
Okay. Yeah.
Comrade Ayo. I think mainly because people really appreciated his practical perspective on issues, right? That he wasn't sitting behind a desk pontificating, but that he was actually getting his hands dirty in the mix of things. And I think people also really appreciated his historical perspective on the Labour Party and the recent politics around left entryism, recent attempts, including TPAP's attempt to enter from above and his own attempt to enter from below and that sort of thing. So I think by and large, that was a really good conversation. I mean, I know that we want to have a follow-up to that conversation where we unpack a little bit what has happened since then with the whole left entryism into Labour. But is there anything you guys want to say about the kind of responses that you've seen to that episode, and maybe just how you found the audience engaging with that episode?
Well, I think for the fact that it's still something that is kind of in motion now and still in play, like a lot of people, of course, there's a huge wave behind Peter Obi and all that, and again, we have a bunch of people that will just step
By the way, I don't know how huge that wave is, but anyway.
Well, okay, huge online wave.
Let's save that. Let's save that for the conversation.
Huge online wave, but a lot of people are actually stepping back to look at this thing from the historical perspective, from ideological perspective, and then try to see it from that unbiased standpoint, to avoid falling into messianism and all that, So it's still unfolding. The VP has just been picked, Baba Dati, what's his name, So it's still unfolding. A lot of people chip in and even go back to the episode and listen to it, So it's still something in motion. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, fair enough, man. And I think more reason why we should come back to that and
definitely.
maybe review what's happened since. Amaka, anything to add on audience response to interviewing Ayo?
I mean, I don't think there's really much to add. It's if I think that if we did some sort of survey, we'd find that most of our listeners